All right, let's go to part 3 because there's a question that's probably been on a lot of yours mind about what about the new variants? You've definitely heard about new variants. They're definitely more prevalent and they're definitely more transmissible. I believe the evidence that says that they're more transmissible. Do they avoid antibodies? Are they going to impact either transmission or immune evasion such that COVID is around with us longer? And keep your eyes on the prize here because that's the real question. The new variants definitely are new. They're spreading. But I don't think they are game changers. And let me explain a little bit about why. There's observations that I'm basing this on, and there's also reasoning. The reasoning is that the coronavirus actually mutates slowly relative to other viruses. I believe even the flu virus mutates a lot faster than the coronavirus. On the other hand, coronavirus is incredibly widespread, and there's a lot of copies of it. So even if it's more faithful in copying its genome, there's more chances for it to make mistakes, and those mistakes result in evolution, transmissibility, and if they result in something that makes the virus spread more, then they will be passed on and they will spread throughout the population. So the first evidence was that we see more and more of these genomes. In fact, these variants are sort of taking over from the other variants. So they're definitely outcompeting the first variants. That is the first level of proof that they're bad news. But there's other things they have to do to be bad news. Now, I want to also put the transmissibility in context. I believe the data that shows that there's a 30 to 50% increase in transmissibility. But what that means is that it doesn't really change my estimate of what the overall transmissibility is. My estimate of overall transmissibility is it's 2 to 3 times more transmissible than the flu. 50% increase in that means it's 3 to 4 times more transmissible than the flu. Because I'm already using a range 2 to 3 and I'm already approximate, I feel like saying a 3 to 4 doesn't really change my interpretations that much. Just to put it in the extreme context, the most transmissible thing we can think of is measles, which is about 15 times more transmissible than the flu. Something that is 10 times more transmissible, something that is 200% more transmissible, is much worse news than something that is 30 to 50% more transmissible. Don't get me wrong, it's not good news, but it's not terrible bad news by itself either. Actually, what makes me more worried is not the transmissibility. Transmissibility is already high. It's a pain to deal with, even more transmissible. But what I care about is the immune system. Can it still go after it? And the thing is, as an immunologist looking at this, yes, you can escape the immune system, and evolution gives it pressure to want to escape the immune system. So if it can happen, it will. But the thing is, the immune system has been adapted to viruses that mutate. And so it doesn't go after just one part of it. Antibodies have multiple targets, even if you're immunized with just a spike protein. Usually your antibody response will be to multiple parts of the spike protein. Maybe 3 or 4, maybe up to a dozen. And also, antibodies are only one branch of the immune system. If you're measuring immune escape by just seeing if it escapes one kind of antibodies, well, first of all, there's other kinds of antibodies. Second of all, there's T cells, which may be able to have a slower but still effective response later on that you aren't detecting when you see the antibody evasion. So some of the things that we don't have that much data on it, but we do have the prevalence, and we want to see how does that new UK variant, like I said, it's taken over at the same time they had a dramatic increase in cases. Notice I use past tense, had a dramatic increase in cases, because the cases are going down in all the places with the new variant at this present time. But the new variant, the new UK variant, could be responsible for that steep rise. And so I wanted to say, okay, the first thing people ask, I've been a proponent of opening schools. Should this change my reasoning? So I wanted to see the data. Is there evidence that children are infected by this much worse than before? Okay? Here's the age stratified patterns in this new variant in England. And this is the rolling 7-day average. You see it came around in October and it actually showed up in the 15 to 24-year-olds first. That's a very highly transmissible group. And then it came back and it was still high in the green 15 to 24-year-old line. And you see when this graph was made in late December, you got a big spike in them. But when we're talking about schools, most people are not talking about 15-year-olds. Most people are talking about 10-year-olds. At least that's the average age. And when I say school, I'm talking about 10-year-olds because that's the average age for schools. So 0 to 14-year-olds is the black line down here. And you see, yes, they are getting infected by this. They can get infected. It's just they get infected and they transmit less, smaller lungs, less virus, etc., etc. And so that's what the data has consistently showed for this age group. This data also shows that this variant is still low in this age group, is proportionately about as low. And the thing is, it's not game-changingly different. It's not out of order. It's in the same order as everyone else. So if it is more transmissible, and you see that you have bigger upticks in all the other colored lines, except for this black line down here, where you have an uptick that's not really necessarily an uptick. It could be staying flat. All this says schools won't be hot spots more than other institutions, and this has been the argument all along. Schools are, if anything, protected against transmission by this age dependence of the virus. Again, doesn't mean it can't happen, but also it looks like the teachers are not in a higher risk occupation than other average risk occupations. So it doesn't look like the teachers get it from the students more than you would expect. If anything, it would be less than if they were working with people their own age all day. So all this is to say, it's not a game changer in terms of age stratification, and I believe schools should be the last to close, first to open. With most anything, actually, but especially with this. I showed the graph with the IFR at the end of part 1. That shows that for 10-year-olds, COVID is as deadly as the flu. It's the only age group for which that's true, but it's true for that age group, and you can see it on the graph right there. The other thing I want to show is I want to show my favorite kind of graph, the drop-down graph. Again, Atish.com is the one that I do. I cite this on basically every other video, I think. And I do my own version of this with hospitalizations. This is with cases, and this shows you this is not population corrected, so the bigger population will have a higher line. But again on this, down is good, up is bad. And so you can see the disease sort of bouncing around. You can see the initial wave with the U.S., you can see the middle wave over the summer, and you can see the higher later wave. You can even see, if you look really closely, the little bouncings around. Those are where case testing was lesser because of holidays. The first one is Thanksgiving, the second one is Christmas, New Year's. And you see we've recovered from that, but also, even after recovering from that and going up a little bit, it's going down again now. This is still at the level where it could be noise, but I believe from the hospitalizations, I believe it's truly going down now. So let's compare the U.S. to the places where the new variant has been spotted. The United Kingdom. And you see they definitely had a big bump up from their bite that they had, and that bite was actually in November, I believe. And then in December it took off. But then now it's going down again. It's definitely going down. And we go forward again. There's Ireland, smaller population, but you can actually see the bounces more clearly because of the nature of the graph, and you can see Ireland's definitely going down. So a lot of people publish graphs of the first part of this hump, and they assumed that it would keep going up. But as we've seen again and again, this virus does have things pulling it down. This virus has natural enemies, and this virus also has us arrayed against it, doing non-pharmaceutical interventions, distancing, trying to keep it down, wearing masks, and all of that appears to be working. And it turns what looks like a very scary exponential growth situation into actually exponential dropping. It's not quite exponential yet, but it's definitely dropping. Finally, South Africa, and there's been some the scariest news to come out on the new variants came out from South Africa today. But I've still got to say that everything I said in the first slide was based on seeing those and saying, yeah, this could be a bit of an issue, but I don't see it as a game changer yet. And what's going on in South Africa? There you also see a little tick down. And I believe also South Africa per capita has less COVID than other countries. Probably demographics helping them. A younger country will be more protected just by the natural age curve that I've referenced several times today. So yes, this South Africa line is even going down. Confirmed cases are going down. And it looks like these are places where the new variant has been spreading. It looks like it caused that last bump. I definitely won't argue with that. But the bumps, as in all cases, what goes up must come down. And that's why I like the drop-down graph, because it reminds me that we do have this immunological good guys arrayed against the virus bad guys. And we want to hold this down as much as possible. But at the very least, we can see, even when a new variant comes up, in these three places, they appear to be going down again. So let's try to keep it down as much as possible. Which leads me to my final point. Whatever's going on with the new variants, the vaccines should still work. Maybe they'll work 80% as well instead of 90% as well. That's still above what I expected. So it comes down to the fact of, if we have these new variants and we're worried about them spreading, then yes, let's keep the non-pharmaceutical interventions. I would argue we should relax some of the non-pharmaceutical interventions that may not be helping us as much, but the ones that are relatively cost-free, like wearing masks and things like that, let's go ahead and keep doing that, keep an eye on what's going on, hope that the same thing happens here that happened in England, Ireland, and in South Africa, apparently. And the other weapon that we have is the pharmaceutical interventions, the vaccinations. And news for the Washington residents that are here, just a couple hours ago, it was announced that we are moving to the next tier of vaccinations, where if you are age 65 and older, whatever your condition, remember, age is the most important thing with this virus. You are at the most danger, and my state is opening up the vaccines to you, 65 and older. So I am going to help all those I know and love who are 65 and older get their vaccines both times and things like that. So all that's to say, hopefully your state, if you're listening to this from another state, is going to be competitive with Washington. I want to get us all competing with each other to see who can do the most vaccinations at as quickly as possible, because that's a much better race than who can hold back the virus by, with non-pharmaceutical interventions. Pharmaceutical interventions are really good. And that's why I'm happy to train students to do the science, to develop new ones, and to implement the ones that we have. So all this to say, yes, I hope that this is a little bit of good news. There's some clouds on the horizon, but like I said, I actually see good news for the next couple weeks, and I will continue to keep an eye on it. Hopefully I'll have a new data update that continues to be this good next time. Until then.